Are you interested in the relationship between technology and art or creativity? Well, if you are, you're in luck, because that's what this video is all about. Now, normally what I do is produce 10, 12-minute videos every week that explore different areas of how technology impacts the human experience. But my background is in art, illustration, graphic design, and recently I was asked to do a public lecture about the way that art and technology interact, and particularly the way that AI is changing the landscape. So what I thought I'd do is do a kind of audio recording. So it's a bit different to my normal videos. It's an audio recording where I take you through all the slides. It's a bit of a deep dive into this area. Lasts for about an hour. One thing to point out is that this will be flagged as having AI generated content. That's because I've included a Gen AI video that I've made as a discussion point to talk to you about. But rest assured, I am real. I am not AI generated. Anyway, I'm glad you've landed on this video. I hope that you enjoy it. Consider subscribing if this is your kind of thing, and I'll pass you over to the audio version of me right now. This lecture is called Tech Killed Art, the value of human expression in a machine-made world. As anyone who's familiar with Layered Future and the channel, or people who know me know, my background is within creativity and art, and it's what I do both in teaching and on a freelance level. But also I'm really, as everyone knows, very, very interested in technology and the way that it impacts not just art, obviously, in the entirety of the human experience. But a lot of what I do in terms of my professional work relates to technology and art together. So this lecture is really combining those things into a fairly kind of whistle-stop tour, really. It's quite, I touch upon different areas. I don't delve into some of these areas in a really deep way because it's quite a broad lecture for the general public, just so that people get a good flavour of the impacts, really, that technology has had on art and is going to have on art in the coming years. So, first things first, the title of this lecture is intentionally provocative. I intentionally gave it this name because I want people to get a really clear idea that technology is hugely impacting creativity, and it has done for a very long time. But in recent years and moving forward, it's going to impact to degrees that we've never really encountered before. So I wanted the title to be provocative, but to be quite honest, I don't think that technology has killed art in any way, shape or form, but it has killed certain approaches to art, and it's killing certain approaches to art. It's killing the old ways of doing things, and it's certainly impacting art in a vast range of ways. So while technology hasn't killed art, it has changed how we value it across history. Because when we create things in certain ways, we imbue those creations with our time and our effort, and we imbue them with the struggle of human creativity, struggle of the human creative process. So as technology has steadily taken away aspects of what people do within the process, it has changed the way that people value art across the span of history. And that goes back a very long way, as we're going to explore in a second. But at the moment, we're almost in a kind of upwards arc of progression, almost vertical progress stream that we've entered across society. It's not just obviously within art, it's within everything. It's within science, technology, every area of the workplace, education, healthcare. AI is accelerating. If we see it as almost like a rocket fuel, it's accelerating so many areas of technological progression, and it's doing that at a much quicker rate than we can keep up with as people. So this lecture is really about understanding that particular shift that we're going through now, or about to go through. We're in the midst of, but it hasn't fully unfolded yet. So the point of this lecture is to explore the changes, explore the shift, and to question what that might mean as we move forward. The intention is not to unsettle anyone. That's the last thing I ever want to do. In fact, Layered Future is, my intention of that is the opposite. I want to provide a really balanced overview of things. I don't want people to feel concerned. I don't want people to panic and think that technology is going to destroy everything. You might then question why I called this Tech Killed Art. It's just really to put people in the right headspace. But actually, I don't think that technology is destroying humanity in any way, but I do think that it's rewriting what it means to be human. The intention is not to unsettle anyone or to blindly celebrate the wonders of technology. And I think there's a lot of people out there, there's more than enough people on YouTube, certainly, who are blindly celebrating the wonders of technology. And I'm a massive fan, or I suppose I'd say I'm really interested. I'm really driven by technological progress. I love reading about it, researching it, and finding out how it's changing and adjusting our ways of life. But this lecture is not going to blindly celebrate, and it's not going to hopefully unsettle anyone either. Instead, I want to explore what these changes are revealing about us as humans, because that's the really important thing that I think is often missed within discussions. We talk about technology can do this, that, or the other. A new tool will come out, a new AI model will come out, a new way of generating art, whether it's imagery, video, music, will be released. And we talk about what can we do with this? How can we integrate this into our workflow? What can we create? But we often don't stop to think about what the impacts of that are, how that changes what the human experience is, and how those changes can shed light on what it means to be a human in 2026, what it means to be a human full stop, what drives us, what are our actual goals. I think that technology is a fantastic lens to look through, and these changes that are coming up, that are just kind of starting now, are probably going to be the clearest snapshot of what humanity is. I think it's going to almost be like a floodlight onto humanity in so many different ways. So let's start at the beginning. Art began without tools. I think we can all appreciate that and understand that. If we remove all tools, we're left with just our bodies, our senses, and the materials around us. When we're born, anyone born in 2026, unfortunately, in my opinion, is not ever without tools. You are immediately born into a world of tools, and you're almost handed a tool from birth, whether that's a toy or whether it's a book or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying you give a newborn baby a book, but you know what I mean. People are given things that extend our abilities and replace our imaginations to an extent. So if you go all the way back to sort of hunter-gatherer periods, there weren't advanced tools for creation, obviously. So people were using things that they found around them, natural pigments, clays, which is basically mud from the earth, stone. And if you, in this image, you can see that there are, that people are using tools here because they've got bowls and things. So even if you go back to tribal systems within hunter-gatherer eras, people were using tools. But the point I'm trying to make is these periods of sort of organised humanity were perhaps the sort of least tool-oriented. They were the least amount of tools used, and yet creativity was rife. It's innate in us. It kind of seeps out of us. Once a human is born, one of the first things they want to do once their brain starts to develop is to create, to draw, to manipulate the world around them. You'll see with most children, they want to draw. That's a really a key thing that a child wants to do, is draw, create, come up, get ideas out of their head and come up with things, get them down on paper. Okay, so without any tools, we're limited to finger painting, manipulating clay, or arranging natural objects found in the world. And this is where human creativity began, but you could also say it's where it's at its most limited. Now, I don't mean limited in a negative way. I just mean it's where human creativity is just us, our ideas, and what we have to hand. Now, there are people like Andy Goldsworthy, who I think is a fantastic artist. He uses natural materials that he finds in the world around him, arranging them to create beautiful artworks. So I just want to be really clear. When I say that not using technology within art is limiting, I don't mean that it's bad. I just mean that it doesn't allow huge amounts of manipulation, changes, editing, which we've become used to as a society. I actually think that we need to return to more simple ways of doing things in a lot of areas. I myself have got quite into wood carving recently. That's something I really want to explore. And I think that we need to find our way back into the roots of creativity so that we can really connect with ourselves and connect with nature. So I'm not dismissing in any way people who don't use tools or many advanced tools in their creative process. Tools extend our capabilities, they expand what we can do. That's obvious, but it's something that I think we do need to highlight. A tool can be a hammer, a tool can be a knife to carve something, a tool can be AI. So there's a huge amount of shades of grey in between those things, but all of them do the same thing, which is to extend our capabilities to a greater or lesser degree. In many ways, tools define human creation, or they've come to define human creation, and they define humanity. If you look across the span of the globe at the moment, you walk along any street, you go through any country, you go anywhere, tools are everywhere. We're surrounded by tools. We use tools in everything we do. I'm sitting here at the moment at a desk, which is a tool, in front of a monitor, which is a tool, with a microphone in front of me. I've got a keyboard, I've got a mouse, I've got a computer. There's just tools are almost like the substrate of human existence. They support everything that we want to do. So has Tech Supercharged Art? Is that what it's done? Has it taken what visual creativity can be or creativity can be, and has it supercharged it? Well, yes, of course. Every major leap in art has followed a leap in tools. So when technology develops, evolves, and enables more things to be done, creativity goes along with it hand in hand, and you'll see new forms of expression emerging. Things like charcoal used to draw on walls was replaced by more advanced mediums like paint, oil paints, and things like that. And then painting itself was to an extent replaced by photography for various things. I'm not saying painting's died, it hasn't. It's still massively appreciated and something that I teach and love. But photography has replaced areas of what painting used to be, what the purposes of painting, such as portraiture or capturing particular scenes or objects or explaining stuff. Visual communication used to be through painting, and a lot of it is now done through photography. Importantly, tools haven't replaced creativity, they've expanded it. That's a really important differentiator. They haven't taken away our ability to create at all. Throughout the span of history, what they've done is allowed us to create more things with more diversity. They've allowed us to create things with more originality in some cases, and certainly with more refinement. Technology's also allowed us to realize ideas that were previously impossible. So not only does technology allow us to refine what we do and adjust what we do and perhaps create things with a greater quality, but it also opens up doors into new things, new ways of doing things that end up in results that are completely unique, completely original, and hadn't been encountered before. From sculpting tools to oil painting, photography, film, digital creation, each technological step forward has changed what art can be. It's changed what creativity can be. These tools have come along and they've kind of directed art and creativity down different pathways. It's taken us on a different route. And without those technological developments, we would be in a very different place. So you can see how it's pushing and pulling what creative people do, pushing and pulling what artists do, and it's taken us in a new various new interesting directions. So instead of killing art, technology has in fact made it more powerful. If you view it in the ways that I'm talking about, it's supercharged it, it's added fuel to the fire, it's like a steroid injection, it's pumped it up and enabled art to be something that can touch on so many different areas. It can be broadcast globally, it can be created in huge scales and tiny scales. So I don't see technology as a barrier to creativity or a barrier to artistic expression. I see it as a potential driving force, as a potential multiplier of what creative people can do. But, and that is a big but that I've put on the screen, we need to define the difference between art and craft. I think this is something that is obviously done. People discuss the difference between art and craft, but it's not often discussed in relation to technology, or it's not discussed as much in relation to technology. And I think that's almost, there's a kind of pyramid. I should have done a slide really that showed a pyramid of art, craft, technology. These 3 points that interact with each other in different ways and intersect, but they're all pushing and pulling in different directions. It's important to explore the difference between practical skill and expression. So the two things are very, very different. You can be very expressive with no skill, and you can create something with incredible practical precision that is totally non-expressive. The problem is many people equate great art with great technical ability, and that is completely understandable. It's certainly how I started out. When I was younger, I saw what I thought was great art was great paintings that looked very realistic. That was my assessment as a 10-year-old, 12-year-old. And my opinion on that has changed over time. But a lot of people, when they first look at art, or then they're not particularly into going to exhibitions or deeply embedded in the art world, a lot of people's assessment of what good art is good technical ability displayed on a canvas or within a video or a photograph or whatever. And we naturally admire displays of precision, control and mastery. That is nothing to do with art, actually. We just like seeing people do things really well. And you'll see, a great example, completely unrelated, is people watch endless TikTok videos, Instagram reels or whatever, of people trying to throw a ping pong ball 30 feet into an egg cup. Yeah. So we just like seeing humans display real precision and control, but also mastery over the world they're in, conquering the physical world in some way. And art as very much is linked with that, or at least the expression of practical skills is very much linked with that. But that admiration is actually focusing on craft and not art. So that's why I'm mentioning this now. The admiration that we see when someone looks at a great landscape painting and feels like I feel like I could actually step into that scene. It looks so real, the way they've captured the light, etc. That's actually looking at how well the person who made it has applied pigments in a particular order on a surface. That isn't about expression. In fact, a straight up painting of a landscape, a straight up portrait of someone isn't necessarily expressive. It's the same as a photograph. It's capturing something in the moment to a really high fidelity, to showing real skill and precision. But that's not expression. That's capturing reality in a 2D form on a canvas or, on another surface. So when people are looking at this, they're actually focusing on the craft, not on the artistic expression. Craft is about how something is made. Art is about what something means. Now, they're both completely different, but they have a really important relationship, which I'm not dismissing, but it's clear that these are two different things. One is about technical precision and accuracy, if you like, accuracy of doing a process well, whereas art is about meaning. A great piece of art can be a smudge on a page if it has the right context, if it's communicating the right thing in the right way. So as I said, the two things often overlap, and when they do, I believe, and this is very subjective, this is what I think, that's when we get something that's truly special. So you look at someone like Michelangelo and the incredible sculptural work that he did. Now there's a lot of meaning behind, for example, the statue of David, but also that is combined with incredible anatomical knowledge, hand control, tool use, and all that kind of stuff. So it's clear that when these two things collide, not only expression and craft, not only do we get a fantastic outcome, but we can also appreciate both of those elements combined into one final piece. But nevertheless, art and craft are not the same thing. Sometimes meaning exists without technical perfection. As I said earlier, it doesn't have to be technically perfect. It doesn't have to be a display of skill for it to be something that can be appreciated, can be a thing of beauty. So you can look at things like the Dada movement and things like Marcel Duchamp and his urinal. These things clearly do not require a lot of technical skill, or indeed any technical skill that we would recognise, but it is the placement of an object, the selection placement of an object can mean something. Duchamp called these ready-mades. They're not, even that term, ready-made, shows that it doesn't need to be made, it doesn't need any skill and craft in the production. And yet, it is an enduring piece of art. It is something that has huge layers of meaning, and it's challenging what art is and all that kind of thing. So I think this is a great example of how there is a notable difference between the appreciation of craft and then the appreciation of something as a piece of art. And sometimes technical perfection exists without deeper meaning. So you'll get people like, for example, ceramicists, people making pots, cups, bowls that are actually really beautiful to look at. We can see the huge amount of technical skill that's gone into their creation, but they aren't standalone pieces of art with loads of contextual meaning behind them. They're not things that you stand there and you ponder. They're things that you look at, you appreciate, incredible beauty of them, that a human could manipulate clay and go through a really technical process to get that end outcome, but they wouldn't necessarily be considered pieces of art. But regardless, both are equally important, but in different ways. You'll find, as I do, working within the art world as an educator and creating stuff commercially on a freelance basis, you will find there is a lot of discussion within that world about art versus craft. There's a lot of people that think craft is a bit of a dirty word because it's associated with hobbies and things like that. I'm not of that mindset. I think craft is so important and is so underappreciated in society. So I think both art and craft are equally important, but they are different. So with all that in mind, has tech killed craft? I think that's a good question we need to ask. I don't think it has, but having said that, it has greatly limited the financial value of craft. So even though clearly there's amazingly skilled craftspeople out there, I don't think anyone would say that craft still has the same financial value, the same commercial value that it used to have, say, for example, in the medieval period. As tools have improved, the need for manual skill has reduced. So what's happened there is that technology has encroached on the world of craft and technical expertise, and it's reduced the need for people to create these beautiful things. A great example would be I bet you in your cupboard at home, you've got lots of cups that you use to drink coffee, tea, or whatever. But how many of them are handmade? I had one handmade mug, which I really liked, that my partner broke. She'll kill me for saying that on here, but she did. She dropped it, and I loved it. It cost me money. It cost me, I think I paid about £25 for it, whereas you can buy a mug for £3 in a local supermarket, mass produced. So that is a great example of how technology has basically removed the need. It's certainly removed the need for manual skill. Not necessarily, it hasn't removed the desire to see things made using manual skill, but it's removed the need, the requirement. And that's because machines can now do things that once took people years to learn. I spoke in a recent video, I think it was last week's video, the week before, about how one of the things that technology removes or impacts most is our relationship with time. So it doesn't remove time, but it changes, it speeds things up. So it puts us in what I would describe a world of fast time. You can get things really, really quickly. And we evolved as humans in a world of slow time when things took ages to come to fruition, whether that was crops growing or whether it was us working on a finely crafted table that took us 2 weeks to build. Okay, so machines have kind of changed our relationship with time, and they've sped everything up. That has a huge impact on the value then of things that take longer to create. So over time, printing replaced hand copying, and if you look at, say, for example, monks who were creating illuminated manuscripts and things, that was a really labour-intensive job. It might take a monk a year to make a book. One person, 1 year to create a book, hand painting and hand calligraphy and all that kind of stuff. And then the printing press came along, and so, for example, like the Gutenberg press, when that popped up, didn't pop up, but when that came along, that really changed our relationship with books, enabled us to distribute information, imagery. We could communicate at scale all of a sudden very, very quickly, but it reduced the value of someone doing it by hand, because people weren't going to pay someone a huge amount of money to create things by hand when they could just run off lots of prints from a woodcut and a press. Obviously, cameras have replaced certain forms of drawing and painting. I touched upon that earlier. So if you look at newspapers, even from the sort of Victorian era, the 1900s, you'd see illustrations in there. Now, of course, when there's a news event, when there's something going on, something to report, it's photography. So that's a very clear replacement. So digital tools have replaced physical processes. Great example would be something like animation, which would traditionally have been carried out using models and stop frame animation. So you'd have used manipulated models 24 times a second, taking a shot with each one, very labor intensive. And then computer software came along that could digitize that process. So something like Toy Story, which came out many years ago now, I'm trying to think, 90s, can't remember the exact date, but these kinds of animations greatly sped up, or that these processes greatly sped up what animation was. And again, that doesn't mean that we don't appreciate traditionally made animation. Things like Wallace and Gromit, made using plasticine models, still very, very popular, because it carries something with it. We'll go into that a bit later about things that are imbued with that human time and effort. So it's true that technology has reduced the need for craft, but it hasn't removed the desire for it. And that is true in both makers and those who appreciate things that are made by people. So we're in a situation where we don't need a handmade mug. We don't need a very slow process animation. But we appreciate them, we want them, we see the value in those things. And I think that's a really important and interesting area that we don't often reflect on. And I think it's something that we really should start reflecting on, particularly as we edge ever further into a kind of automated future. So, can tech automate art? This is a question, and it's something that is getting a lot of exposure within the media, mainstream media, social media, people talking about, debating the value or not of AI art, with terms like AI slop being used to talk about this kind of like generic generated AI content. People talking about true creatives losing work through AI generation. So, will people want artists, designers, as machines are able to create a very high quality illustration, design, etc.? What's important to realize is that we've now entered a new phase, and anyone who is observing what's going on within the world of AI and the world of creativity can't have missed that. It's something that is clearly highlighted in almost every area, whether that's in graphic design, illustration, video and filmmaking, then moving on to other areas such as music production, etc. It's something that is on everyone's minds because they can see the capabilities of machines increasing at such a rate. Today, technology doesn't just assist creation, it engages in it. So whether it doesn't really matter what people's viewpoint is on AI creating stuff, the reality is that technology has gone from assisting us in creating things, but it can now engage in it. It can create something from beginning to end. At the moment, we still need to ask it to do that. We still need to give it fairly solid direction and prompting, but the potential is there. We're in 2026 at the moment. We're moving into an era of agentic AI where AI is going to be generating stuff off its own back. We're no longer in a situation where people are using programs like Photoshop and using tools within it to manipulate stuff and using digital processes in a human-led way. We're moving towards an era, kind of in an era already really, where technology is creating stuff. AI can now produce images, music, writing and video in seconds. And that's something that I certainly never saw coming. I mean, I'm 46 now, and I wrote, actually, when I did my university degree in illustration, my dissertation back in 2005 or 6 was called Computers in Art, and it was all about the use of computers to create visual outcomes, really. And at that time, I did a hell of a lot of research for that. There was no rumblings that I could see. I mean, surely people embedded deeply in AI research and machine learning research or whatever may well have seen this coming. But as someone on the ground, someone who was a creative, someone who did a lot of research, I had no idea that this would happen. AI-generated outcomes are often of an exceptionally high technical quality. So going back to the whole craft thing, let's forget expression for a second. An AI-generated outcome, if it's well prompted, if you do multiple generations of them and then choose the best one, if you are prepared to go in and post-edit it for 15 minutes, adjust a couple of things using a program like Photoshop, I would say that AI art outcomes are generally a lot better than a lot of people creating stuff. Okay, it's learnt from the best. It's learnt from some of the best examples of painting, drawing, illustration, digital art, and with that knowledge, with that understanding, it can recreate things in original ways. So I actually have a bit of an issue with the term AI slop. I find it really annoying, actually, and I'll tell you why. Because I just see it as an insult against something that we fear. I see it as a term used because we haven't fully come to terms with how things are changing, and we fear those changes, and as a result we've come up with a name for it, and slop sounds horrible. It sounds like it's a load of rubbish. I mean, if you look at AI generated outcomes, how you can say that's slop? If a person had produced an image like the one I just showed you, you wouldn't say that's just a load of slop. And I understand where the term comes from. People see it as loads of information going into a kind of like a pool, and this sort of bubbling liquid of information, and then it spits out these bubbles of kind of of creative output. But anyway, regardless, I think it's not a very helpful term, because I think that we will be using AI-generated outcomes probably in about 90% of use cases in the coming 5 years to 10 years, and certainly in the 2030s, we'll be using AI-generated outcomes for most things. But what is AI actually doing within this process? What is it, how is it creating these things? Because I don't think a lot of people fully get it. I think a lot of people think that AI just has access to every image in the world, and then it kind of, when you ask it to create something, an oil painting, it will look at the work of Constable or something while you're asking it, and then sort of copy it. That's not how it works. It's recognizing learned patterns that it's acquired during its training period, and then it uses them to make unique things. So it's clearly not like the human brain. It's not a mind with emotion. It doesn't have a sense of self. It's not embodied. It doesn't have a sense of time either. It's a digital version of an aspect of our brains. It's a digital version of aspects of our problem-solving abilities, kind of our creative abilities as well. But importantly, it is not drawing from lived experience. And so while I think that AI generation is amazing, I think it's a technological marvel, I think it blows my mind in so many ways, I can hold that in my head and also hold another really important truth in my head, which is that it isn't drawing from lived experience, which is what human creatives do. It's what a human artist does. It's what a human musician does. It's what a human who expresses themselves in any way does. All of the experiences we've had in our lives are ingredients that kind of bake a cake, which is the outcomes we produce. So my upbringing, I grew up in a village in England. My parents took me out on holidays in Cornwall. I spent a lot of time in the countryside, but I was obsessed with video games. I didn't have a video game console. I used to go to arcades. I got really into the visuals of that. Look, I could go on. There's so many things, so many ingredients, millions of ingredients that have gone in to giving me lived experience, which when I create something acts really as pushing and pulling forces that shape the outcomes I create. And that's totally different. AI doesn't have that. AI, I suppose you could say, has access or has had access to the outcomes of trillions of lived experiences, but it hasn't had access to the lived experiences, and that's different. Importantly, it's not expressing felt emotions in the human sense. Now, you'll see artworks where you can see they're in pain. You can see they're in psychological pain when they've created them. You can see something that isn't art. Let's say, for example, a wood carving, which I'll show you some pictures of in a bit, relates to something else. A wood carving, you can see the marks and you can sense the sometimes the fact the person was probably a bit tired, where certain areas are not quite as refined as others. And that is so different to what AI is. AI is the antithesis of that. AI is doing everything in a highly optimized way. Okay? So it's not expressing anything. There's nothing within what it creates that expresses a feeling, because AI doesn't have feelings. We, every single day, experience a huge mix of emotions, not necessarily as extreme as in some of these pictures, but we feel sad, we feel happy, we feel just generally content, we feel scared, we feel concerned, we feel anxious, all these different things. And these feed in, they're all ingredients, valuable ingredients within any creative process to create something that is what I would describe expressive. So AI is only capable of generating convincing simulations, and they're really good. Look, when AI generates a photorealistic image, it's very, very good, but it's not a photo. It's not what something has seen through a lens with their eye and chosen in that moment to press the button, to press the shutter, to take that picture. It's not creating something when it's just lost a loved one. It's not creating something with that psychological pain. It's simulating what someone might create if they were feeling that. But that's an important distinction that I think we all need to recognise. Now I'm going to use an example of a film that I really love by a director I love. That's Barry Lyndon is the film, and it's by a famous director everyone knows, no doubt, Stanley Kubrick. It was created in 1975, Barry Lyndon, and it was important for a range of reasons. So it was shot, some parts of it, using the Carl Zeiss Planer 50mm f/0.07, which was a revolutionary new lens. It was actually developed for NASA, or NASA developed it for to take photography of the moon because it could capture imagery with very little light. And Stanley Kubrick wanted to create scenes in Barry Lyndon using only candlelight. In 2026, that seems, whatever, we could do that on our phones, right? So we can capture really, really high quality video on an iPhone or an Android phone of a scene with very little light. But back in the 70s, you needed to use studio lighting to properly light people, and you needed to have a really decent lens. Also, within Barry Lyndon, obviously you had set and costume designers. There was, as I said, lighting, so a crew of lighting people, but also lighting equipment. There were script writers, there were storyboarders, there were actors channeling emotion, really important. And Kubrick certainly went to great lengths to get emotion out of his actors. In part by having many takes, so you'd have sometimes over 100 takes until someone was psychologically broken and you could see it in their faces. Then you've got editing, you've got sound production. There's a huge amount of things that go into a film, and you can see these things in Barry Lyndon. What they all equate to is human effort. Okay, so I want you to hold that in your mind, human effort. I just wanted to watch these clips that I created using VO, which is AI video generation platform, and I wanted to try and create something that had the vibe of Barry Lyndon. So this is the prompt that I used to create that video. This is the sum total of my human effort. Okay, so it says create a 1080p 16:9 video, that's the dimensions, cinematic 18th century period drama set in the interior of an opulent European palace at night. And then I go on just to add a few more details in. That took me, I don't know, a couple of minute to write, something like that. So you can see, if we go back to the human effort required for something like Barry Lyndon, you're talking thousands of hours, and that has now been condensed down into a minute or two, and then the technology that can create it. But when we compare AI output with human-made work, something feels different. Okay, so I purposely didn't put any clips of the Barry Lyndon film, the original Barry Lyndon film, into this video lecture for copyright reasons, but I encourage you to search out some clips of the candlelight scenes in particular on YouTube or wherever, and I want you to just, in your mind, compare that with the AI output that I just showed you. So when we compare AI output with human-made work, you'll see that something feels different. That sounds a bit airy-fairy and a bit floaty, but it does. Something feels different. It feels different in our bones as we watch both of them. AI video might not always appear different visually, but when we know it was made by a machine, we don't connect with it in the same way emotionally. Actually, a better way of putting that would be, when we know something is made by people, we can connect with it emotionally. Okay? So there are clear differences between machine outputs, machine outcomes, and human-made outcomes, not necessarily in the visuals, but in the knowledge, the underlying knowledge we have that a human has gone to great efforts to create that thing. And going back to when I was talking about animation, you can see this if you look at something that is digitally rendered, if you like. So something like Toy Story, which is a fantastic film, great story, great narrative, and an amazing technological wonder of its time, definitely as well. But if you look at that and you look at, say, for example, Wallace and Gromit, The Wrong Trousers, or Wallace and Gromit, A Grand Day Out, there is a different connection you'll feel. And that in part is because you know that someone manipulated those models by hand, but it's also because there's imperfections. And that's a whole other topic, which I'm not going to go into in huge depth in this, touch on it a bit, but not in huge depth. Human frailty, human flaws, human mistakes, human variation imbues outcomes with magic. And again, that's something we don't talk about nearly enough. But I think above everything, it feels different because human outcomes carry context. There's so much that just sits underneath the surface that is directing, that is pulling strings within the creation of something that we never see. We never know what that is. We don't ever connect with it directly, but it informs, it adjusts, and it shapes what people make. Human-made things are embedded with time, effort, decisions, and constraints. All those things are vital ingredients. Time is so important. Someone spending 3 days knitting a jumper imbues that jumper with something which someone who is just on a production line with machines automatically creating clothing there is nothing imbued in there other than speed and value, as in financial value, cheapness. Yeah. Whereas something made by humans, time is such an important ingredient. Effort, having to focus and concentrate, having to do something instead of doing something else that person might feel like doing at the time. The decisions they make, the problem solving they go through, and the constraints, the physical constraints they may have, but also the constraints of the materials and the tools they've got to hand. Put simply, things made by people carry the presence of people, and that can never be replaced. And I think a lot of people that are worried about AI taking over areas of creativity really need to reflect on this. Creativity and art, stuff that carries important meaning, that people value, that when people value that meaning, that can only be created by people. Sure, there will be AI that generates stuff in the future that comes from AI that people will associate value to, or give value to, or see value in, I should say. They will see the importance of it because it's maybe a machine expression. But expressions by people, that can't be replaced by machines. If it is, then it's machine expression, and that is a totally different thing. Okay, so now just for a bit, I want to talk about the reality of art production. I want to shed a bit of light on what art production has been like for a long time, because this is really important when we think about AI being a contributor, if you like, to the creative process. When discussing the role of AI, it's important to highlight that most human art has rarely been a solitary process. This is something that I talk to people about. I seem to talk about this quite a lot. It's gone into a couple of my videos, but also it's something I seem to be saying to a lot of people to not defend AI use, but to contextualize it so that people understand how AI can be perceived as a tool, as a valuable resource within the creative process. Many great artists have worked with teams that they direct. This is the way life has been for decades, for centuries. This is the way that artists and creatives have made things. Not all of them. There are obviously a lot of artists that work completely by themselves, completely alone. But in terms of creative output, I would say the majority of creatives work with other people. They collaborate in some way. But some obvious, kind of more extreme examples. So painters like Rubens ran large workshops in which other humans extended his capabilities as an artist. So he literally had what you could describe as a production line of artists where he would sketch stuff out, direct them in creating the bulk of a painting, but then come in and add in key details like facial features and different things to stamp his authorship on it, really. So to imbue that painting with his own expression and make it a Rubens. And then film directors, we've talked about Stanley Kubrick, talk about him again. A film director like Kubrick worked with hundreds of collaborators. When he made Barry Lyndon, or he made 2001, or he made The Shining, or whatever, he was working with hundreds of collaborators. He was directing them, he was pulling the strings, but he wasn't a creative doing it by himself. And contemporary artists often rely on fabricators and assistants. If you look at someone like Anthony Gormley, for example, he created the Angel of the North, a fantastic sculpture, but he didn't do it by himself. It was teams of people that were building that. It was his creative vision, but he had lots of collaborators and people helping him along the way. So in that sense, you can see that creativity has always been supported by systems. It's supported by systems of people, systems of tools. And you can see AI is quite similar to that, but it's shifting those systems away from human networks towards machine networks. AI is basically another system of support, but I would argue that it's probably the most democratic system of support that's ever been invented. We often talk about the internet as being a very democratic technological force, and it is. It's leveled the playing field with access to information in so many ways globally. And AI is doing a similar thing across multiple disciplines. We're talking about art today. So within art, it's providing ways of creation, assistance in creation that just simply wasn't available prior to its inception. But it operates very differently because it has capabilities that enable it to create autonomously, and that is clearly something that separates it out in people's minds. And I think that is what people find the difficult thing to accept. It operates differently in the sense that it can make decisions by itself, and often does, and we direct it. But then if you look at, say, for example, a cameraman on a film set, you might say, take a shot from this angle, but then that cameraman will adjust the aperture. They will adjust the camera angle slightly. They'll track a character for a certain amount of time. They're making decisions on the fly is what I'm trying to say. So when AI does that on our behalf, is that any different? I'm not giving you the answer to that. I just want you to consider that. Is that any different? The other thing I wanted to explore is how tech supports expression, because I think it's important to point out that technology is integral in bridging gaps in ability. I mean, that is probably technology's greatest attribute, is that it can bridge gaps. And it's also probably the thing that people complain about the most, you know? So when technology obviously bridges a gap in our ability, our skills, people say, oh, you've cheated, you know, you've got a machine to do that, you've got AI to do that, or whatever. But actually, we're not focusing on the really important stuff, which is that some people have disabilities that stop them from doing the things that they really, really want to do. Now, technology has long enabled people to express ideas they couldn't otherwise realize. So, carrying on with the filmmaking analogy, if you want to transport another person into a fictitious world where they feel like they're there, they feel like they're observing something happening, and you want to control the visuals of that, you want to show them visuals that are in your mind, well, film is fantastic. Prior to film and video, that was not possible. So technology has long enabled people to express ideas that they couldn't have realized otherwise. And technology can also help people to fast track towards successful outcomes. So let's say someone who's a little bit older, who's never done any woodwork, wants to get into using wood in a way that they don't want to spend 10,000 hours becoming an amazing hand carver, then they can use something like a lathe or similar machinery to create things relatively quickly. And it sort of ticks the box, gets the dopamine flowing in their minds of, oh yeah, that's successful, that looks good. And it can actually open a world of different creative expression where they do take up hand carving, they take it in different directions. So tech has played valuable roles in this way. But as I touched upon a second ago, tech has really played a crucial role in accessibility. People with physical or technical limitations have been able to engage in acts of creation because of technology. It has bridged the gaps that have held them back previously. So in that sense, technology can empower us to be creative. And at a time where technology is getting quite a lot of bad press, I suppose, because of AI and AI-generated creative outcomes, we mustn't forget this, that technology can actually be the pathway towards many people actually being able to be creative in the first place. And we shouldn't take that lightly, because it's given a voice to people who may otherwise have been forced to live silently in a creative sense. It allows people to have a creative voice, and I think that's really valuable. And on the topic of value, I want to talk about human time for a little bit as well. One important consideration is the value of time embedded in creative work. I mentioned this earlier on in the lecture, but I just want to focus on this a little bit more because I see it as being so important. Human-made objects carry hours, days, sometimes years of effort. So something that's made by a person, they need to invest time. We've all got a limited amount of time on this planet. And for a person to dedicate, even if it's just an hour, but it could be a year creating something, that is a commitment that carries with it value. That is a sacrifice that carries with it value. And it's something that I think as a society, as a civilization, we really need to start focusing more on. We need to start seeing how creatives, artists, musicians, actors, all of these people are sacrificing time in their life to give us something, to gift us something. And that has such value. And you can often see and feel that effort, especially in physical work. Now, obviously you can see it in, say, a digital painting that someone's created with a tablet. So seeing it in a digital form, like a JPEG on a screen, yeah, you can see that. But in physical work, it's much more notable, it's much more visible, and you can feel it, sense it in a much more kind of visceral way. As I said earlier, I'm a bit obsessed at the moment with wood carving. I've always been into history. I love medieval carving, but I've become a bit obsessed with medieval carving recently. So I go to a lot of churches and I photograph misericords or misericords, however you want to say it. So these are the wooden carvings that sit beneath stalls that are in the choir stall areas of medieval churches in the UK and obviously in other parts of the world as well. But I'm photographing ones in the east of England. Actually, I'm not sure whether these were in the east of England. I can't even remember where these were taken, but I might have taken these when I was on holiday somewhere. But I absolutely love the human effort that you can see within these. And you can I'll get down onto my knees and sort of feel the wood, feel the marks of the wood, feel the traces of that human effort. You can see, I don't know how well you can see it in this picture, but you can see where tools have touched the wood, and you can imagine that a person did that 500 years ago, which is just a historically valuable thing, but it's a connection between, I see it as a connection between me and that person who made it. Even though they lived a long, long time ago, English language has changed so much, we probably couldn't have a particularly meaningful conversation. Within that artwork, I can feel their presence, and that is so, so powerful. So yeah, so here's just a few examples. These are just taken on my phone, so they're not the best pictures in the world, but you can see the different marks and the different creative decisions actually that were made. And these would have been made by an artisan, so a travelling artisan probably, someone who went from church to church doing carvings for cash. That's how I think about it. Might have stayed in a local barn, may have stayed there for a couple of weeks, may have had local children coming and watching as they carved outside a church out of oak, very difficult, very hard wood to carve. Anyway, so medieval carvings, for example, still hold traces of their makers. The marks, the wear, the aging of materials, these things cannot be simulated by machines. Yes, they could be visually simulated, they could be synthetically simulated, but the actual marks, the wear, the aging, well, you can't simulate that. That comes through human effort and it comes through time. And because digital work does not age, it doesn't carry time in the same way. So I mentioned a JPEG a moment ago. A JPEG is a JPEG is a JPEG. A JPEG in 1,000 years will be the same arrangement of binary code as it is now. The only way that it may have aged is that it's become corrupted and it no longer loads. You can no longer see it. But other than that, the image will be represented exactly the same if it's on the same screen 1,000 years later. So digital work doesn't carry with it that time, that age. I've already mentioned a little bit about the importance of flaws. So as I said, this is a massive subject area, and I've talked about it in some of the videos I've produced already. Talking about the sort of the magic, if you like, of mistakes and human frailty that you can see within creations. But regardless, I'm just going to sort of cover very briefly something about the power of imperfection. And that's because the truth is that human creativity is full of imperfections. In fact, it's what defines it. It's what separates it from machine-created outcomes. And I think that is where a lot of the value really, truly lies. But even though I've used the word flaws, I think it's best not to see those imperfections as flaws. We naturally view them as that, but actually they are just things that prevent an outcome from being 100% perfect. But a flaw means that something is worse, but I actually think that these imperfections make artworks better. And that's because they're vital ingredients that give creative work character. Character is such an important word. We use it to describe an old cottage. We use it to describe a village or an object. But when it comes to artwork that is made by people should have character. It should have, I feel, the character of the person that made it embedded in it in some way, interwoven into it. In that way, they stand as evidence of decisions, reactions, and constraints. So they become objects that are physical representations of our decisions, our reactions, and the constraints we're under. The polar opposite of that is machines that produce perfection, whereas humans produce meaning. And as we march forward ever further into an era of automation and AI-generated content, I think we really need to start holding up that word above our heads, meaning. What value does this have? What is meaning? What is meaning in an AI-driven world? Well, meaning comes in part from a lack of perfection. It comes from mistakes. It comes from striving to do stuff. It comes from not achieving things, but almost achieving them. Meaning is a complex word when it comes to humanity and our purpose and all that kind of stuff. But I think we really need to start exploring what meaning is. Okay, so with all this said, what will be the impact of AI? Well, AI-generated content will become more common. It's already increasingly common across most of the things we see, whether that's social media, whether it's television, film, digital content we see. AI is beginning to be one of the key contributors, but it's only going to become more common over time until it becomes one of the dominant forces in content creation and the creation of visual and creative outcomes. That's because history dictates that powerful technology travels in one direction. AI has already proved itself. It's proved itself to be an incredibly capable way of generating creative outcomes, of generating visual outcomes, generating music, generating video. So it's not going to go away. It's only going to improve, progress, and become more prevalent. But that doesn't mean that human creativity becomes irrelevant. In fact, it means its value becomes clearer. I think that AI is shedding light on what it is about human-made things that we really value. I've covered a lot of them within this lecture. Those imperfections, those flaws, the time spent,
the embodiment of a person's emotions within an outcome. All of these things are so important, and AI sheds a light on that. In a world of infinite AI-generated content, human work is only ever going to stand out. It's going to be the thing that rises to the top of the surface, the thing that people will actually be prepared to pay more money for, because it will be that unique thing, that higher quality. In our minds, it's higher quality, more not more refined in a technical sense, but more refined in a connection sense. It's something that we can really connect ourselves to. And that's because it isn't perfect. It's because it is human. And that slide alone, those words alone, I think are the things that I want everyone to take away with them from this lecture today. And it's because it connects us to other people, their thoughts, their effort and their experience. So going all the way back to the start, when I said that I chose intentionally a provocative title, technology hasn't killed art. It will never kill art. Instead, it forces us to see what art really is. That was the purpose of this lecture. That's the point. Hopefully, I've in some way achieved that by highlighting how technology, AI in particular, sheds light on the purpose of art, on the meaning behind art, and all that kind of thing. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Hopefully this has helped in some way, or it's got you thinking about certain things in a different way, or maybe it hasn't at all and you've just enjoyed listening to it. Either way, thank you so much. Always consider subscribing to the Layered Future channel. I normally do 10-minute videos, one every week, released on a Wednesday, about different areas of how technology is impacting the human experience. But occasionally I will drop in longer form lectures like this. If you want more stuff like this, let me know in the comments, because I'm more than happy to do some longer form kind of audio based deeper dives if that's what you're after. Okay, thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you again in the future.